Uh, Hello everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of a series that I will call Digestible D&D, series where I teach you all about the very basics of making a Dungeons and Dragons character and playing the game and all of that wonderful stuff. This episode, the very first inaugural, will be all about the very basics. Your dice, your sheet, some tools you can use, all of that wonderful stuff. Now, the very first thing, of course, that you would need for a D&D game is, writing utensils if you're playing on in person. This is going to be this focuses on is playing in person with some friends or whatever. Pencil, only ever use pencil. Okay, you can technically use a pen if you really wanted to, but it's generally not recommended because you're going to be erasing a lot. As you can see on this sheet, I've already marked it a little bit, just swiping the pencil across. And erasing is super easy. And erasing is super easy. An eraser, if you don't have an eraser on your pencil, you get one of these. They're like $5. No idea where I got that one. Probably stole it from somebody. Then the next thing you're really going to need is, of course, some dice. Now, dice are very important. It's the dice game, after all, and I'll go over what every dice means in just a minute. There's not a d20 there. There we go. Now, I'll go over what every dice means in just a minute. It doesn't matter. You can get metal ones like this, plastic ones like this. You can go to Walmart and pick up a thing of dice for like $5 if you want. You can also use online tools, online dice or whatever. It's usually going to be more fair with online dice, because it is technically a perfectly random number generator. I'm not even going to pretend how I understand how all of that works. Gonna need paper, whether it's D&D sheet like this or just regular old scratch paper. You're gonna need paper. Paper is gonna be your friend. You can take notes, which is very important to do. Never forget to take notes. Your DM will thank you for it. And those are like the basic things that you're gonna need, right? Now onto the dice. You've got your standard. You got your standard D6. For when you need it. Some weapons, and it's basically mainly weapons and spells. We'll be using that. You got a D4. Some do happen to look like that. Most that I've seen look like that. This is less common. This is more common, so I'll be going over using this. Your D4, I think, is only used for spells, daggers, and that sort of thing. So again, it's magic and weapons, basically. And that's what a lot of these dice are going to be used for. Majority of the dice, except for this one, we'll get to that in a moment. Majority of these dice are going to be used for in-game mechanics. Your weapons, your magic, the fun stuff, the fun part of the game, if you will. The very next, however, this is... Some of these are also used for hit dice as well. Some classes, like the wizard, uses a d6. Your more martial characters, but less tanky characters, like a bard or a warlock, will use a d8. Clerics also use a d8, I believe. And your d10s are used for fighter hit points. And the biggest one, the d12, if I can find one, your d12 is going to be used for like a barbarian. A barbarian would use a d12 as a hit die, and we'll go over what that means later in another episode. It'll be when it becomes relevant. Actually, it might be later today. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But your d20s here, 20-sided die, goes 1 through 20, and it's going to be used primarily for your skill checks, which you can see here. There are other things it's going to be used for, your saving throws, and your initiative up here. You roll a d20, and that will determine the outcome with whatever you roll. So, say for instance, as an example, say you have you're making a history check, you'd roll it, You can see I got a 9. I got a 9. Add whatever modifier that is appropriate, and that would be your finalized roll for the check. And then the DM would determine what the result of that roll is. Cool. Next up on the unique side of dice is your D percentile dice. And this is used only in extreme circumstances. This is not used very often. It is not the most important, but basically with this kind, because they do make 100-sided die. In fact, I have one somewhere. I just don't know where it is. Excuse me. But this is used primarily as a table roll die. You have 100 results or so on a table. You roll this, and whatever you roll will determine the outcome. So, for instance, you roll both of these. That's a 26. 100 would be 000, and a 1 would be 00 and a 1 on your 10. So let me see. That is a 1. So on and so forth. And that is your dice, the most important part. Now again, you can do it physically, or you can do it online. I'll go over the online stuff in just a few minutes. But you're focusing on the physical. This is your physical. And the difference between your physical and your online dice, it's very basic. Your physical dice, they're prone to being imperfect. Metal dice are usually better about being truly fair than plastic dice. So if that's the road you want to go on, although these usually cost a little bit more, maybe about half again more. Not terribly more expensive, but you can get really expensive pairs of dice. You don't need it. Again, you can go to Walmart and pick up a pack of game dice for like $5-10. Go online, order it from like Amazon or whatever, and that'll cost you like $10. It's not super expensive for these. This specific set was a little more expensive because they're kind of unique. But beyond that, we got the character sheet. Told you we'd go over that now. Go over the character sheet now, what everything means. So this is your basic front page character sheet. There are multiple pages. We'll go over every page separately. But this is the main page. This is where everything that is mechanically related to your character is, except for your spells. And the spells are on their own separate page. It is on the last page, in fact, because they gotta make it complicated on me. There's your spells. But we'll go over this page real quick. And we will get into building a character. In fact, I will do a video on building every class separately. Because, if you don't want to play a fighter, you want to play a rogue, and I only have a video where I'm building a fighter, that doesn't seem very fair now, does it? So, naturally you got your character name. This is what you call your character. You can call him anyone. You can call him Jim Bob. You can call him David. Whatever you want to call him. Doesn't matter. It's just how to refer to your character. You got your class and level. So this is what class you're playing. Say a fighter, and your level, just level 1. Just say your background is where your character comes from. That kind of goes into the more roleplay aspect of the game. So, for instance, you could be an acolyte, you could be a folk hero. There's different backgrounds you can find. Just choose one that makes sense for the character you want to build. So, if you want to play like a soldier, there is a soldier background. Player name, that's your name. You don't have to put anything there if you don't want to. Race, this is what you're playing, human, elf, dwarf. You can go more specific like drow elf, high elf, mountain dwarf, hill dwarf, all of that wonderful stuff. Alignment has lost a lot of its meaning as D&D has kind of evolved and expanded, but this is basically your alignment on a 3x3 grid, and I'll put up a picture if I can find one, which I should be able to, of law versus chaos, good versus evil. So you'd be lawful good, chaotic evil, true neutral is what the very middle square is called. Experience points. If you're not playing with experience points, you don't got to worry about that. If you are, it's just how many experience points you are closer to your next level. Very simple, kind of like a video game, like an RPG video game, right? We'll go over here now. These are called your ability scores, and that is what determines not only your skills but also how you fight with your attacks, your spell casting, and all of that good stuff. Strength is how strong your character is. Kind of self-explanatory. It's your ability to throw something, to hit with most weapons. Caveat being weapons with a specific property. We'll get into that in just a minute, or maybe in a later video. But it's how strong you are, how athletic you are, as you can see here. Is athletics is determined by strength, and every character sheet does have a hey, this is what ability score affects this skill. Excuse me. So, for instance, athletics is strength. I think it's the only strength. Yeah, it's the only strength-based skill in the game right now, other than your saving throw. We'll get to that in a moment. Dexterity is how dexterous your character is. Acrobatics, stealth, theft, that kind of stuff. It also determines how well you can pick a lock with lockpicking tool, thieves' tools, or lockpicking stuff. It helps with certain types of weapons. Your ranged weapons will use dexterity, as well as a few melee weapons like daggers and rapiers. The more finesse type weapons, which is what the trait is called. We'll get into what the weapon traits in every weapon in a later video. Constitution is how healthy your character is. It affects your hit points. It also affects your concentration with spells, and we'll get into what concentration means when we go over spell casting in a later video. Intelligence is how smart your character is, as in book smarts. So it's stuff that you would study: history, religion, I believe. Yes, their arcane, arcana, are all affected by intelligence. Wisdom, on the other hand, is how versed in the world your character is, how versed in medicine, how versed in the ability to survive, and that sort of thing. And charisma is how well your character can speak, and how they can project themselves out into the world. It is not necessarily how attractive your character is. That can play a part in it, but it is primarily how your character can speak, how well your character can act, how well they can play an instrument. That is what charisma does. It's basically projecting force of personality into the world. Now, these three, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, are all also known as spellcasting ability scores. What does that mean? Well, that means, depending on your type of spellcaster, they would have one of these three abilities, and they would cast their spells with it. In the same way that you would hit with a weapon, depending on if it's strength or dex based, is the same way in casting if you're an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma caster. Now it depends on the class you're playing as to which is your spellcasting ability. For instance, wizards get intelligence and bards get charisma, but a lot of it can be boiled down to talk to your DM about what you want to play, and I'm sure you can work something out if you say want to play a warlock, which is normally a charisma-based caster, but want to cast with intelligence. It's all about talking to your DM, that's going to be a phrase we're going to say a lot. Inspiration is something that is hardly used in my experience, but all it means is you did something really cool and your DM liked it, you're awarded an inspiration, and you can use it as giving yourself advantage. Now, what is advantage? Advantage is a more advanced gameplay mechanic, but the long and short of it is you roll twice, take the higher value. and it's the opposite of disadvantage, which is you roll twice, take the lower value. We'll get into the more nitty-gritty details of that wonderful stuff in a later video. Proficiency bonus. This is determined by your level, and it's just a free bonus you get to skills you are proficient in. And proficiency is basically a level of training. So for instance, and that's what the bubbles mean, in fact. For instance, if this is bubbled in, my hand's covering it, sorry. This is bubbled in, that means you have proficiency in strength saving throws, you would add whatever this number is, and this is determined by your level. Starting out, it'll be a +2, and it goes up every once in a while. And we'll get into that once we start building a character. Your saving throws are some abilities or magic spells will call for you to make a saving throw. You would roll this, and this is separate from your skills. So you can be proficient in Dex and Constitution saving throws, which I don't think any class has that base, but use it as an example. You can be proficient in these two saving throws, but not proficient in any Dex-based skill, and there's no Charisma, Constitution-based skills. Your skills are, well, they're skills. You would use it to make a skill check. Acrobatics is self-explanatory. Animal handling is dealing with animals. Acrobatics is the more dexterous side. It's like gymnastics and that kind of stuff. Arcana is knowledge of the arcane. Athletics, deception. We'll get into what every skill means in a later video. Passive perception, your passive wisdoms, parentheses perception here, is your passive. It's just normally called passive perception, and all it means is, think of just your natural ability to notice things, rather than trying to see something as to what the perception skill is. Your passive perception is just your natural hearing, sight, smell, that sort of thing. Moving the paper up a little bit. Other proficiencies in languages. This is where you would write in armor, weapon, and language proficiencies. And that meaning, excuse me, I'm talking a little fast. Let's slow down. That meaning specifically, your weapons that you are proficient with, or weapons that you would add your proficiency bonus to. Armor that you are proficient with is what would add to your armor class and not give you any penalties. Languages are the languages you can speak, and some races have built-in languages, like elves can all speak Elvish, and some don't. We'll go into that when we talk about building a character in a later video. Armor class is how hard you are to hit, and it is affected by both your dex and the armor you are wearing, whether it be light, medium, or heavy. You gotta read the description of your armor as to how hard you are to hit. Light armor will let you add your entire dex bonus. Medium armor will let you add 2 at max. So if you have a +3 to dex, to your dexterity, your armor class would only improve by 2 plus whatever the armor is. And heavy armor doesn't let you add any of your dexterity modifier. You would put the score here in the small box, put your modifier in the big box. Your modifier is more important. Initiative is a skill that is affected by your dexterity. But the reason it is up here and not with the skills is because this is what you would roll in case of combat breaking out. Now, what does that mean? Well, at the beginning of combat, let's say you have a +3. Let's say you have a +3 initiative. Apologies for my horrible handwriting. If you have a +3 initiative and you roll, that would be an 8. You can see I rolled a 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. And that determines people with a higher initiative go first. People with a lower initiative go last. Your speed is how far you can move. A good default, if you're not certain and you don't write it down, is 30 feet. Most races have 30 feet movement speed. Excuse me. And this can be modified by a number of other things. Excuse me again. For instance, one thing that modifies your speed or spells or magic items. We'll get to that at another time. Your hit points, current hit points, and maximum hit points are both in this box. Current hit points is how healthy you currently are if you've taken any damage, and your maximum is just your max. So if you have 10 hit points max, you put 10 on this line. But if you take 2 points of damage, you would put 8 in current hit points. And this is why it is so important to only ever use pencil. So if you have 10 max hit points and you take 2 points of damage, you can write 8. Oh, you've taken a little bit more damage, you erase this and put in, say you take 3 points of damage, you're down to 5. That is why it is so important to only write in pencil. Temporary hit points is something that you are only granted by certain class abilities and magic spells. If it becomes relevant, I'll talk about it, but as of right now, you don't need to worry about it. Hit dice is your total is how many you have, and your in this box is how many you haven't used. Now, what do I mean by how do you use hit dice? Well, you use hit by dice. Excuse me, God, I can't say that word. You use hit dice by, well, taking a short rest. And a short rest is just an hour rest, or however your DM determines it. Every DM is different. But you could use a hit dice, and you can roll it and restore some hit points. And your hit die is determined by your class. And every class, it's a D6 to a D12. One class uses a D12. It's barbarian. If you're playing a barbarian, just remember this one. Death saves. If this number hits a 0, you would start making death saves, which you would just roll a flat d20. And on a 10 or higher, you pass. On lower than 10, you fail. On a nat 1, you die. On a natural 20, on a natural 1, which is just a 1 on the d20, you die. Just gone. Your character's dead. And on a natural 20, which is a critical success, you are brought back up to 1 and stand up. Now, when your HP hits 0, why don't you just die? Well, that's because you go into a state called unconscious. And unconscious, all it does is it means you can't take actions, you have to start making death saves. There are certain magical effects that give you the unconscious that don't make you do death saves. You just gotta read it. Going down, we got attacks and spellcasting. You would write the name of the weapon, your attack bonus, which is determined by your proficiency bonus if you're proficient with it, and these. Your strength or your dex, depending on the weapon. And then the damage type is whatever the die is, plus whatever the modifier of the ability score you're using, strength or dexterity, plus its type. And now, what is damage type? Well, that's if you use a sword, it's probably slashing. If you use a bow, it's piercing because you're shooting arrows. Magic, it could be fire, ice, it could be whatever. You would just write that here. And that is determined by enemy weakness. And then that final damage is determined by enemy resistances and weaknesses. We'll get into that in a later video. Equipment is what you have. These boxes are for your money. So it goes copper, silver, electrum, gold, and platinum pieces. It's 10 to 10, or 10 to 1. So 10 copper to 1 silver, 10 silver to 1 gold, 10 gold to 1 platinum piece. Electrum pieces is weird. It's 2 electrum pieces to 1 gold piece. So 1 electrum piece is 5 silver pieces. Over here, this is your roleplay. This is a more roleplay focused bit. Personality traits is how your personality traits is personality traits of the character you're playing. You don't have to play yourself in D&D, obviously. Ideals are what your character stands for. Bonds are what major character go on this adventure. Flaws are what's wrong with your character, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something like mentally wrong with them or like a physical disability or anything like that. Flaws could be something as benign as I don't have a filter. That could be you could put that down as a flaw. Make the flaw count, but don't stress it if you feel like your flaw isn't doing much. It's your character. You play your character the way you want to play, right? This features and traits or class features, racial traits, that kind of thing. You'd put dark vision here. Dark vision just lets you see in the dark. You'd put your class features here, whatever your class features may be. All of that wonderful stuff. Moving on to the next page. Character appearance, you can write something here, or you can have a picture. It doesn't matter. This is a very much roleplay focused section. Coming up to the top, character name again. Age is how old your character is. You know, it doesn't necessarily matter. If you play an old man, you're playing an old man. You play a teenager, why? Height, how tall you are. Weight, how heavy you are. Weight might come into play depending on how your DM plays dungeons. For instance, you have to weigh a certain amount for a trap to go off. It is what it is. Eyes are your eye color. I'm not sure why it just says eyes. I guess you could technically have two different colored eyes, or like an eye that doesn't work. I guess you could put that there. If you want skin color and skin blemishes, hair color, hairstyle. Allies and organizations. This can change throughout the course of the game. This is just organizations and people that your character is allied or friends with. For instance, you could be allied with one faction of a kingdom and not another. This section is the symbolage of your character's faction if they have one. For instance, they're part of a thieves guild. You could draw like a thieves guild charm here, put the name of it. That's kind of what I use that for. Character backstory is what happened to your character prior to the adventure. You don't have to write a full novel. This is more than enough for character backstory. And you would work that out with your DM, with your dungeon master. Additional features and traits. This is extra space for this, because this will never hold all of your stuff. So you can just put more here. Treasure, I believe, is stuff that you mean to sell, as well as gems, and art, and that kind of stuff. Get to the final page here. We have the wonderful spell. Spell casting class is what class you're playing that casts spells. So, for instance, you put Bard or Wizard or however you want, whatever class you are playing. Spellcasting ability, this is the ability score, as we went over earlier. It's either going to be Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. You could put the shorthand version of it, or you could put the long form version of it. It doesn't matter. Spell save DC is a flat number that is determined, and I'll write it up at the top here. That is 8 plus your proficiency bonus. I'm just going to put prof B plus your ability score, your Abby mod. So, for instance, that is 8 plus 2 for a level 1 character plus your intelligence modifier, which is determined by your score. And we'll get over to how you to get your modifier from your score in the next video. Your spell attack bonus is just these last two numbers added together. Cantrips are your free spells, it's also called level 0 spells. These are spells that you can cast anytime, any place, basically. You're level 1, and then you have leveled spells 1 to 9. Move it up a little bit, you can see 1 to 9. And these, as you can see, have slots. And a spell slot is how many times you can cast that spell per day, basically. If you're starting at a level 1 character, you'd have 2 level 1 spell slots. As you can see, you put down the spell name, and this bubble over here is if the spell is prepared or not. Some casters are spontaneous casters, as I call them, and some are prepared spell casters, where you have to prepare a spell list for the day. Spontaneous casters just have access to the spells on the sheet. They don't have to prepare it. They don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. That would be something like a sorcerer, for example. Wizards are prepared casters. They have more spells than they can prepare, but they can only prepare X number of spells per day. And I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how many they get. All right, I rambled on long enough. Thank you so much for watching this portion of the video. And a little bit, in the next video, I will go over the online section. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.